This week on Who Deserves to be Inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, we look at the case for putting the Motor City Madman Ted Nugent into the Hall and why he probably won't get it. This week, we are going to take a look at the case for putting the Motor City Madman, Detroit, Michigan's Ted Nugent into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Now, if you've made it past that sentence, then congratulations. You're not one of those people who looks at the podcast subject, writes a nasty comment, and then never listens to the podcast to begin with and moves on. Stay with me, though. I'll take you through all of this. Ted started his career in the 1960s as a member of the band the Amboy Dukes before going solo with his 1975 self-titled album. He interrupted his solo career in the 1980s to become a member of the supergroup Damn Yankees before going back to his solo work. A few years ago, Ted gave an interview where he said that, much like Motley Crue, he was never going to get into the Hall, which he's been eligible for as a solo artist since 2001. In Motley Crue's case, they were told that it was because of their hedonistic behavior back in the 1980s and 90s. In Ted's case, well, he says that it's because of his politics, which are, let's be nice, far right. Now, I'm a live and let live type of guy. As long as you're not hurting yourself or anybody else, you do you. Whatever, your opinions are your own. I've also learned over the decades that in order to not get yourself all worked up and give yourself extra stress and, of course, say dumb things on the internet, you need to separate liking a person for how well they do their profession and liking a person as a human being. I spoke about Ted's chances of being inducted a while back on an earlier version of this podcast, and now I'm revisiting this subject despite how I may feel about him personally. Full disclosure, I am not a big fan of the guy as a human being, but I do like a lot of his music, not gonna lie. Be that as it may, as an artist, does Ted Nugent have an argument for being inducted into the Hall? Also, is it his politics that's keeping him out? Or maybe it's something else. Let's look at his stats first, using his solo career and not including any of the bands that he's been in, like Damn Yankees or the Amboy Dukes. Then let's look at who he's influenced. Then look at the reasons for putting him in, then look at the reasons for not putting him in, and then ask the eternal question, if he were to put out new music or go back out on tour, would you actually go listen to him or see him? Good question. Like we always do, to the tail of the tape we go. Starting in 1975, Ted Nugent has released 16 studio albums, 8 live albums, 16 compilation albums. Of those, 6 of his studio albums and 1 of his live albums went top 40 in America, with none of them going top 10. In fact, the highest that any of his albums got in America was number 13, and this was during his heyday. That feat was set by his 1980 album Scream Dream and his 1978 live album Double Live Gonzo. That said, he did have a nice run in terms of his sales in America anyway. During his heyday from 1976 to 1981, his albums sold at least 500,000 copies each. His first 2 studio albums sold 2 million copies each. His third album, Cat Scratch Fever, sold 3 million copies each. His 1978 album, Weekend Warriors, sold 1 million copies, and his next 2 studio albums sold 500,000 copies each. His live album, Double Live Gonzo, sold 3 million copies, while his 1981 compilation album, Great Gonzo's The Best of Ted Nugent, sold 2 million copies. In the UK, 3 of his studio albums went top 40, with the highest being Cat Scratch Fever, which topped out at number 28. None of his albums were certified sales-wise, as far as I could find, so he may have had a few that sold well, or he may not. We don't know. As far as his singles went, he released 20 of those. Of those 20, 3 hit the top 40 in America, with his 1986 song Little Miss Dangerous doing the best at number 26. Probably his best-known song, 1977's Cat Scratch Fever, hit number 30. His other best well-known song didn't actually do all that well on the charts. 1978's Yank Me Crank Me hit number 58, and 1980's Wango Tango hit number 86. Those numbers include the rock singles chart, by the way, just to take away the argument that Ted was a rock act, and that's why his songs didn't do well on the Billboard singles chart, because guess what? They didn't really do all that well on the rock singles chart either. There were no numbers from the UK, so I'm not sure how well his singles did or did not do there. I will say, though, that if you did want to take his work in the supergroup Damn Yankees into account, then his albums and singles numbers do skew vastly upward, because their first album was a huge album and also had a few hits on it. Also, his guitar solo on the song Stranglehold is considered one of the 100 greatest guitar solos in music history. Okay, those aren't terrible stats, and artists with worse commercial success have gotten inducted. So let's look at his influence. As a guitarist, he has been relatively influential. Guitarists and bands who have cited him as an influence include Slash from Guns N' Roses, Robert DeLeo from Stone Temple Pilots, also the groups Motorhead, Pantera, Blackfoot, Dokken, Motley Crue, the Ramones, Andrew W.K., Brother Kane, and, not shockingly, Kid Rock. Still others, like Henry Rollins of Black Flag and the group Minor Threat, were influenced not by his guitar playing or his songs, but by his straight-edge lifestyle. For those not in the know, that means no drugs, no alcohol. I actually respect that about him, especially in an industry that is not exactly what you would consider straight edge. As far as the reasons why he should be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, his influential guitar work is a big reason. Between the Amboy Dukes and his solo work, he did influence heavy metal and hard rock, although he doesn't get a lot of credit for it. He also had a distinctive guitar sound due to his hollowed-out Gibson Birdland guitar. His chaotic, blues-infused guitar playing was pretty distinctive as well. He was also an amazing live artist. I mean, the dude could flat out own a crowd and put on one of the best shows that I've ever seen. It's no wonder that his live albums are among the albums that have sold double and triple platinum. He has said that he will no longer tour, but seriously, how many times have you heard that from a musician, especially lately? Those guys go back out on tour as soon as their money runs out. Okay, so he has a decent resume, influential guitar work, legendary live performances. Not bad, all things considered. So, what are the arguments for keeping him out of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? All right, let's deal with some basics first, and then we'll get to the elephants in the room. Yes, I said elephants, plural, because there's more than one. And it's definitely more than his politics excuse. Some people argue that his career was built on his first 6 albums and his live performances. Others would argue that his guitar playing style was by combining blues with rock, which really wasn't all that innovative by the time he came around. Still others will point to the fact that Ted's singles success had more to do with classic rock radio and streaming stations, especially in this era, rather than during the time that he was actually quote-unquote popular. All of those arguments are very valid points, and honestly, really can't be argued all that much. They are kind of true. And then there's the elephants in the room. First, let's deal with why Ted says that he will never get inducted, his politics. I don't bring my politics into this podcast because, well, it's a music podcast and no one honestly cares. But politics do sometimes cross into music, and I recognize that, so I sometimes voice what I believe. For the record, I am a moderate independent. I do not like the far left, and I do not like the far right, especially in this current era. Those are my politics. Also, I'm a Christian, but more of the Jesus Christ compassionate Christian type, as opposed to the everybody burn in hell type. There you go. Those are my politics. Should that matter to me or to you or to anybody else in terms of who gets inducted? No. Nor should politics ever matter to the hall voters, who are supposed to judge inductees only on their music and their influence, not on an artist's personal politics. And yet, hall voters are human beings. Now, let us be fair. Ted Nugent has said some of the most racist, misogynistic, and homophobic stuff this side of Nazi fascists. He's insulted Black Hall of Fame members, saying that they don't belong in the hall, even though rock and roll and the blues that he built his own career on were all started by and stolen from black people. Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Fats Domino, Muddy Waters, etc., etc. That type of language that he has used has rubbed a lot of hall voters the wrong way. Now, let's be honest. I don't know about you, but if someone consistently insulted me or people who I know or admire, I'm not exactly going to give them a shot at anything, especially not going to do them any favors and vote for them for anything. See, that's where the personal gets into this when it comes to the hall voters. So I would suspect that he should probably look at doing an apology, but he would probably look at doing an apology as a sign of weakness, and he is who he is. So him admitting that he was wrong and said some really bad things, well, that's not really his thing, so don't hold your breath on an apology. He is who he is. Another elephant in the room is, well, something that he never ever brings up when Ted screams about why the hall is keeping him out. He always likes to scream about the politics. But there is something else, and it's much bigger than his politics, especially in this era, and especially since a guy named Jeffrey is in the news an awful lot lately, especially when it comes to princes and presidents. Release the files. That's all I'm going to say. Let's just say that Ted was not exactly dating a lot of older women back in the day. I'll be nice and just leave it at that. If you really want specifics, all you got to do is just Google Ted Nugent and women, and you'll get the idea. Actually, more specifically, Ted Nugent and girls. To be fair to him, though, with his argument, there have been other artists who are in the hall who have also had the same rumors, both substantiated and unsubstantiated, about them. However, Nugent's alleged behavior might be a huge reason why Ted has not been taken seriously for consideration ever, because the hall now frowns upon that behavior, whereas before it would just be a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, and boys will be boys type of thing. Not anymore. Now, to the last part. Would you, if he were to put out new music or go back out on tour, actually go and see him and get excited for seeing him? I gotta be honest with you. Yes and no. I would probably go see a concert with him, as long as it was with other people as well. I wouldn't go specifically for him per se. I don't know about listening to any new music by the dude, but I would probably go and see him in concert. Dude does put on a great show. And that is one of the hallmarks as to whether an artist is worthy enough of being in the hall, is do you still get excited about them? If not, then they're probably not worthy of being in. So there you go. With everything I've said, I will say that I have completely changed my opinion from a few years ago about whether Ted Nugent deserves to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. When I first posed this question to myself years ago, I said absolutely not. No way in hell. Then, next time I did it, I said yes. Years had gone by, little older, little wiser, not as judgmental, we'll say. You know, he at least deserves some consideration, I'll say. Now, especially after the year everybody's had and is still having? I'm not so sure. I don't know. However, he's probably not going to get in anytime real soon, both for the political reasons that he thinks and more probably for his alleged behavior in the 1970s that he does not talk about. So, what do you think? Can you look past what he has done and said about other people and judge him strictly on his music and influence? Just strictly on his merits. That's it. I don't know many people who can, honestly, but the comment section's open for you. So let's hear it. And be nice. Don't tell us that the Hall sucks. We know that already. I say that every week. The Hall sucks. We know. We get it. Thank you. But let's just put the question out there. Does Ted Nugent deserve to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame strictly based on his music and the merits of his artistry? That's it. Leave the politics out of it. Leave everything else out of it. Or don't. Maybe that is the reason why he should stay out. Maybe there is a morals clause. I don't know. You tell me. Because honestly, at this particular point, I'm not quite sure which way I'm going on this anymore. And that is it for who deserves to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We also invite you to check out our other podcast, the Music History Today podcast, where we go over what happened on that date in music history. That podcast drops daily, including weekends, on this channel that you're either watching or listening to this podcast on. We also have the Music History In-Depth podcast, where we go more in-depth into the events that happened for that week in music history. And that podcast posts every Tuesday on this channel that you're either watching or listening to this podcast on. Thank you very, very much for listening or watching if you're on YouTube or Spotify.